everyone, welcome to my channel, Books, Gurrs, and Purrs. My name's Leslie, and today we're going to focus on poet, author, and music and social critic Hanif Abdurraqib. And outside I could hear a leaf blower. I hope you can't hear it. I'm sorry if you can. I'm going to talk about three books. One is a children's book, and the two others are the author's work of poetry, two poetry collections. All right, so Hanif Abdurraqib wrote a children's book called Sing Aretha Sing. It is adorable. Adults will love it. It's about Aretha Franklin, but the story is told, how do I say this? With the song Respect. I don't want to say as a theme, but I feel like he uses a song to tell the story of Aretha's life. I hope that makes sense. And so the author wrote this children's book because he didn't want the only focus of Aretha's life to be on her singing career. He also wanted her political activism to be remembered. And the children's book's only 21 pages, so it's not going to cover everything, but it does a really beautiful job of boiling down these really important points in Aretha's, I guess you could say political activist career. And it was really beautiful to see. I knew that she grew up singing in a church, but what I didn't know, which is a big I didn't know, was that she left when she was, I want to say 16, to go on tour with Martin Luther King Jr. So while he preached, then she would sing. And I just didn't know that. So I really loved it. It's really beautiful. And as I said, the song Respect is used throughout to talk about the singer's life. But what I also liked is that he did something in the children's books that I've seen in other children's book, but I just think it was used really effectively. For instance, he would use one letter for each of the word respect, and it would to make a point or to say something about the arc of her life or story and the effect that she had on other people. And I think that's also the focus. It's just the impact that Aretha Franklin had on others. And I thought that was really beautiful. Something else that the author does is that he uses, I think it's personification with clouds specifically throughout the children's book. And I like that he didn't mix it up too much, right? Of using all these different, maybe different, what am I trying to say? Objects or to use personification to tell the story. He used one object specifically, which would be a cloud. And I thought that created a consistency and a nice flow to the story that I really enjoyed. And on the very back of the book, there's some other points, basically like an author's note, saying some other things about Aretha Franklin that the author wanted people to know, but he couldn't necessarily include in his story. And I really enjoyed that. I almost wanted this book to turn into a series of books about Aretha, but just through different songs. I really wish that he would continue doing that. It was just really beautiful and I enjoyed it. And yeah. One other point that I didn't know was that the song Respect was originally sung by Otis Redding. And I know Otis Redding, but clearly I don't know enough because I don't remember ever hearing a version of him singing that song. So I'm definitely going to look into it. And I also wanted you to know that because that was pretty cool. All right, the next book I read by Hanif Abdurraqib is A Fortune for Your Disaster. I read 2 poetry collections, and I'd have to say this was my favorite. I absolutely love this, but also I listened to the audiobook along with reading this book because I love listening and reading. If that's my option, I love to do both. It also helps with notes. But what I also noticed is that I could hear the leaf blower and it's so loud. What I like about the audiobook is that before some of the poems, not all, I want to say like once every section, the author will chime in and bring a little bit of a context to his poetry and or what he's doing throughout. He'll kind of like let us as a reader get clued in, and I really enjoy that because there are just certain things that the author points out that I don't know if I would have caught as a reader and someone that doesn't read a lot of poetry because it always feels a bit daunting. And so I'm going to put that down. I have notes. And so it's broken up into 3 sections: the pledge, the turns, the prestige. And some of these poems will have the exact same title. So there's an evolution of it with a certain, not the title, but you'll have a continuing title and there's an evolution of what the author is talking about. So for instance, there's The Ghost of Marvin Gaye, and then you'll have some iteration of that title. There's It's Not Like Nikola Tesla Knew All of Those People Were Going to Die. And so through that, the author talks about like the cost of invention and oh gosh, what am I forgetting? He also talks about heartbreak, and there's another one where it says something like, oh okay, how can black people write about flowers at a time like this? And so that's another poem where you're constantly seeing that title, but the author expands. And there's a progression to what he's saying. And then that the author says in the audio version how he grew up in a cityscape, so he didn't really have a connection to flowers or nature or the earth and in maybe a way that he would like to. And so he wanted to actually talk about the disconnection that he has. And all the collections were absolutely beautiful. And an example of what the author does well in the audio version that I listened to through the Libby app is that he has a poem, one of the poems for Ghost of Marvin Gaye, and it's on page 67 in the Prestige section, as well as on page 97, the last poem that's actually called The Prestige. There's 2 different like poetry styles. I'm not sure how, or the structure, and he actually names it so that we as a reader know what he did. So one is a contrapuntal poetry and the other one is reverse erasure. I haven't heard of those before. Maybe I've seen poems like that and I just wouldn't know to call them that. I wouldn't know like the purpose of it or how to read the poem, and so the author bringing that up just really helped me learn how to digest the information. And so I really enjoyed that the author did that, and I also feel like it's a way to create a sense of like community within poetry, just like if someone actually went to a poetry event or like to listen to people speak and talk about their poems. There's just a different feeling about or experience of it versus reading it in a book, and I felt like the audio version really brought that, and I really enjoyed that. The author also does bring up some like very conversational pieces, if that makes any sense, or I should say like conversational experiences such as sports, movies, music, which he does in his other books and poetry as well, and also eavesdropping, which kind of brings this silliness to some of the poems that I really enjoyed. All right, so there's one poem I'm going to talk about, and it's on page 19, and I'll tell you why. It's not just the poem itself, but once again, the fact that I listened to this on audiobook, and it's called "With Boxes Piled at the Foot of the Stairs, I Go to See Logan." And so in the audio version, the author brings up that he had just went through some heartbreak, and he knew the one of the X-Men movies came out, Logan, and he thought, oh, that'll make me feel better, and he went to go watch it. But I've also seen Logan. And so knowing that, I just thought to myself, oh no, because it's such a emotional movie. And so he said by the end of it, he was crying, and one of the ushers asked if he was okay, and he wasn't. But there's nothing for this stranger that he doesn't know to do anything. So that actually made me laugh because I can relate. Back when the movie Logan came out, I happened to be working a job that I didn't like, and I kind of felt like a little bit stuck. I didn't know what my next move was going to be, and I did the exact same thing. I thought, oh, Logan is out, I'll go see Logan, just to, you know, perk myself up, make myself feel better. Went to go see it, and the same thing happened. I was in tears at the end. I like burst into tears. People are walking out of the theater, and I like couldn't even hold it in. So in a really romanticized way, I just like the idea if at that very moment when I'm bursting into tears as a credits roll, that this author is on in Ohio doing the exact same thing at the same time. So yeah, I love this poetry collection. It just really, it swept me off my feet, and I felt like I felt very welcomed when I was reading it, rather than feeling daunted by a poetry collection. I felt like the author was embracing me as a reader more than any of the other poetry I've actually read. So I really love that, and I think you'll love it too. That brings me to one more poetry collection, and that is The Crown Ain't Worth Much. I'm not going to say too much about this poetry collection because I didn't have the time to take a lot of notes like I usually do. So I'll just say this. I think the author and I are around the same age, and I say that because of so much of the musical references that he makes in this book. And I felt like I was having this experience of nostalgia, as well as reading from an author that throughout his work, through every single piece, he brings up political and social strife that's going on in America. And I like how he weaves that all in, from moments of being at a house party to the complicated and sometimes difficult, like, social situations he experiences or witnesses. And something that the author also does really well is that he reflects on public figures, singers specifically, and this really beautiful, almost like romanticized way that's tinged with sadness. And so I absolutely love this collection. I know I keep saying that a lot, but I did. I still think that I liked A Fortune for Your Disaster more than this, but I did really enjoy this. And so I'm just going to read, I think, the last stanza to one of his poems, and the poem is At the House Party Where We Found Out Whitney Houston Was Dead. And I'll read the last stanza. Later, we press our backs into the roof of a house that even at 4 a.m. sways with us like a metronome of well-timed memorial. The sky is unchained and careless, and wrapped around us both like our long discarded childhoods. I look up and ask myself again why the stars have so long tolerated the audacity of clouds. I laugh loudly and tell Jasmine that it is impossible for a human being to wake up dead. She is already asleep. So yes, this author has already solidified himself as my literary crush. And I have 2 more books left to review. I did finish the book that he wrote about A Tribe Called Quest. I'm going to review that in a separate video along with his most recent publication that came out. I can't think of the name right now. I don't want to say it wrong. But so yeah, I'm going to have those out in hopefully like another week. So we have to wait long also for my book wrap up. But yes, I enjoyed all 3. I really love that children's book. That children's book was so beautiful. I even read it to my daughter. I was like, and she's a teenager, but I was like, you're gonna have to hear this because it's so beautiful. Anyways, thank you all for watching. I love you, and I'll talk to you later.